From Scott. To Ghost Discussion. Subject: bizarre occurrence or an overactive imagination. Very long. Date: Saturday, July 11th, 1998. Hi all. Once again I am posting something that I've thought about posting ever since I first joined this list. I think you all will realize very quickly why I haven't posted it before. To this day, even I'm not completely sure what it is I saw. I know what it looked like, but I found that it's better for me not to believe that it really was what it looked like. This happened years ago. I really don't remember how old I was at the time, but I don't think I was more than about 9 years old. That would put the time of this somewhere during the summer of 1984. My grandparents, my mom's parents, lived down in the country about 15 minutes away from home. I was spending the weekend with my grandparents. The story that follows occurred on the Friday night of that weekend. It was after dark. I was on the couch, turned around and sitting on my knees, looking out a large picture window. I was waiting on Grandpa to get home from work. Grandma and I were the only two people in there. As I waited, dense fog began to form. The fog began to grow thicker as time passed. Grandma was getting a bit worried that Grandpa was late getting home, and she was afraid he'd have an accident due to the low visibility brought on by the fog. Several more minutes passed. I was still kneeling on the couch, watching out the window for Grandpa. Then I saw what looked like two lights coming up the road towards the house. At first I thought the lights were the headlights from my grandpa's car, but then I realized the lights were not the right color. One light seemed to be lemon yellow, while the other appeared pink. I watched, curious, as the lights moved closer. Then I yelled for Grandma to come to the window and look at them. Grandma was busy preparing supper and didn't want to come out the kitchen. I took another look at the lights, which were still moving closer, and then went to the kitchen to try and convince Grandma to come and see them. At this point, the lights were still not much more than fuzzy-colored blobs due to the thick fog. I left the window and ran to the kitchen. I told Grandma that there were a pair of lights approaching the house. She said something along the lines of, "Good, he's finally home." I told her that the lights didn't look like they were from a car. I told her about the odd coloration. Finally, Grandma agreed to go take a look for herself. Running, I got to the window before Grandma did. I resumed my former kneeling position on the couch before really looking out the window. The lights were still there, closer than before. They were just starting to take on a more definite shape, like something was emerging from the fog. Grandma leaned forward for a closer look at the solidifying shapes. I turned to her, asking what the lights were, and she didn't know, acting a bit scared at this point. I turned back to the window. The strange lights were almost at the house by this point. Thinking back now, I realized just how bright they must have been to be visible at first. Then, the lights finally took on a more tangible shape. This is the part that really makes me doubt what we thought we saw. What we saw were two cows, both bulls, dancing along the road on their hind legs. No, this is not a joke. One was glowing yellow, the other was glowing pink. Each of the bulls had a front leg, arm, draped over the shoulder of the other. They were heading towards the driveway. At this point, Grandma fainted. I only remember giving her a quick look as she collapsed beside me on the couch. Then I resumed staring in disbelief and shock at the sight outside. The bulls danced along until they got to the driveway, turned as if to make their way up to the house, then both just faded away. After some time, I'm not sure exactly how long, but I don't think it was more than a minute or so, I turned away from the window to Grandma. She was still unconscious. I had no idea how to revive her. I remember shaking her, as if trying to wake a sleeping person, and talking to her. I do not recall what I said. After a few moments, she began to stir. As Grandma woke up, she turned quickly back to the window. I told her that whatever we had seen was gone. I asked her what we had seen. Grandma sat me down on the couch and told me that I was not to breathe a word of what happened to Grandpa. I asked why. Grandma wouldn't give me an answer. She just kept telling me to keep quiet about it. A few minutes later, we heard a car slam outside. Grandpa was home, again. Grandma warned me not to say a word to Grandpa about what happened. Naturally, the moment Grandpa entered the house, I ran straight up to him and told him everything that had happened. Grandpa spared only a second to ask Grandma if she were okay. The moment she said yes, Grandpa retrieved his shotgun and went outside. Grandma began to scold me very loudly for disobeying her orders. Several minutes later, Grandpa came back in. He had found nothing. To this day, neither of them will discuss what happened that evening. If that had been the end of the matter, I would have convinced myself years and years ago that Grandma and I had simply been hallucinating. In fact, not too long after the incident, I had convinced myself of that. Several years after seeing the bulls at my grandparents' house, a friend of mine who I grew up with came to me one day with a story. I'll call this girl A. Both she and I were about 12 when she told me this. When I lived in Ohio, this girl's grandparents lived directly behind us. A lived mostly with her grandparents during the summer months. Only a one-way alley separated our two yards. Across this girl's grandparents' yard was the railroad bed I've posted about a few times in the past. On the other side of the railroad bed was a small farm. We lived at the very edge of town. A came to me one day saying that she had seen something very strange for the previous night. I asked her what she'd seen, and A made a very long speech about how I'd think she's crazy if she told me. I pointed out that she already brought up the subject. Obviously, she wanted to tell me. A agreed. She said that late that previous night, she had been unable to sleep and was looking out her window. It had begun to get foggy. In the fog, A claimed to have seen two glowing lights moving across the pasture and back to the farm. One light was yellow, the other was pink. Please keep in mind that I had not told anyone about what happened to my grandma and I. A said that as the lights got closer to the railroad bed, they had begun to take solid shapes. At this point, I was starting to get cold chills. A said that she must have been seeing things and that she wouldn't waste time telling me the rest of the story. I insisted that she did. After a few minutes, A said, almost in tears, that the lights took the shape of two cows. Bulls. Each bull had a front leg draped over the shoulders of the other. Both appeared to be dancing along on their hind legs. They were moving toward the railroad bed, toward A's grandparents' house. A said that at that point she had turned away from her window and hid under her blankets until morning. After A told me her story, I told her my own, a very similar one. As far as I know, A never saw the bulls again after that night. I never seen them myself again either. If not for A's story, I would have long since come to believe that what Grandma and I had seen was a hallucination brought on by the dense fog and car headlights or something. A's story makes me think again. I don't know what we saw, but I do know we saw something. Anyone have any ideas? Scott. What I just read was a part of the True Ghost Stories page on Obi-Wan's UFO Free Paranormal page. This story was documented on a page called The Dog That Turned into Green Mist, Cows Standing on Hind Legs, and Other Cases of Gibbering Insanity, a 2001 forum thread on the Charles Fort Institute forum board. From what I know, the Institute specializes in, quote, the understanding of strange experiences and anomalous phenomena. So, yeah, I guess that fits. Now, while I can't find the dog turning into green mist, I can find other gibbering insanity. Now, the next story I'm going to read you is, well, let's just say, do you remember those old, shitty, lost episode creepypastas from back in the day? It's kind of like one of those, but less overtly stupid. From Brian Bett. Subject, a television tale of horror. Date, Friday, August 9th, 1994. Hi gang, it's me again, with some tales to scare the hell out of you. Sorry it's taken so long. Though I've responded to several threads, there have been no new stories that sprang forth from my terminal in quite some time. I have no idea why I feel so compelled to respond to the strange stuff having to do with television. I've only told this story once or twice, and although it was believed, at least that's what they told me, by the listeners, it's usually not something you'd post to a news group and get read by a bajillion people worldwide. But here it is, so deal with it. I will warn you now that this sounds kind of goofy. I honestly don't know if it was a waking dream of a child or something supernatural, or just something I ate. I'll leave it to you, generator, to decide. But when I think about it, even all these years later, for some reason it just rings true. I don't know why. Maybe with luck, I'll never find out. My strange and terrifying television experience! Okay, so I'm not gonna read this one out, because it is pretty long and I'm kinda bad at reading these, I'm gonna be honest. The story starts with our storyteller in his grandparents' house, again. As he falls asleep with his grandparents, he wakes up in the middle of the night and decides to go watch some TV. But suddenly, the TV turned itself on. Da-na-na-na-na. Da-na-na-na-na. Now, this would usually probably just be excused in scary stories by, oh, well, you probably just sat on the remote, you fat fuck. But the writer does describe not having a remote. Nothing was on the TV at first except just static, but then he began to saw something slowly appear. Ooh. But it's fine, because it was just fucking Sesame Street. It's just the Sesame Street Muppets. It's all fine, it's all good. Quote, Muppets. The Muppets were on. I wanted to wake my grandparents up, but then I started to feel a bit uncomfortable about what was happening on the television. The Muppets did not usually have fangs, as I recall, at least not the ones that looked so real and out of place in the otherwise standard Muppet-style mouth. Yeah, you see where I'm getting the shitty 2010s Lost episode feel from this? Though I guess this was posted in the 90s, so really it's a classic OG 90s Lost episode creepypasta. Ooh, retro. He describes the two Muppets he sees on screen as one being Grover-esque, and the other looking like Harry the Monster. But they both have fucking, like, sharp teeth and bloody eyes. Okay, that part's a lie. They don't. But they do have claws. And they both start whispering to each other, kind of angrily. And they start, like, beckoning him to the TV. And he's like, no, 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 no. And he's, like, shaking his head. But they keep on going, like, come on, kid, come on, come over here. I mean, they don't say that, but they just keep, like, beckoning him over. And eventually they just kind of start looking fucking pissed. And, like, the grandparents, like, they just can't be woken up at all, or they just don't care. Quote, I should mention that all of this singing, dancing, and cavorting horror that was going on seemed to in no way disturb my grandparents. This disturbed me as well, because these guys were loud. So then the kid gets up and he starts, like, trying to sneak around the room, away from the TV, but into the other room. And the entire time the Muppets are just, like, scowling at him and trying to wake up his grandparents for some reason. But they just don't care. They're fucking out cold. They took, like, 50 fucking Xanax and they're gone. So the kid goes into the living room and just kind of, like, cries into the couch, which is, yeah, that's pretty realistic. And then the TV in the living room starts turning itself on. And they just start, like, fucking with him again. It's not Muppets this time, it's just, like, scary shadow people. And it just makes him fucking scream. And apparently he describes the monsters kind of just, like, looking worried. Like, oh shit, he's screaming, we gotta get out of here, man. And turning the TV off as his mother runs in the room. Now, as much as I've lightly shit on this story, it's actually a better creepypasta than most actual creepypastas. Though, I am assuming that this was meant to be 100% believed and probably even thought to be real by the writer. Now, are either of these stories real? Fucking no. No. Uh, no. No, not at all. Like, definitely not. I mean, the dancing bulls were cool, but I don't think it was real, like, sadly. But the bull story does interest me a lot. Especially just because the kid describes his grandma fainting and his grandma and grandpa never wanting to talk about it again. Now, I assume maybe they both hallucinated and grandma just didn't want to talk about it because she was fucking scared out of her britches. Or, the whole story is fake. But either way, it's pretty interesting. It was pretty fun to see some, I guess, 90s creepypasta in a way, and I know that sounds very stupid, but it's kind of what this is, especially the second one. And speaking of the second one, what was it real? Was it real? No. I'm really wanting it to be real though. Like, real as in this actually happened to this kid. Now, and I know that sounds bad because it's like traumatizing, but that is such an overactive imagination if it was real. And holy shit, would that be scary. I remember I'd imagine things as a kid. I think something that happened a lot is I would hear a woman's name calling me from like across the hallway. It was always kind of just a faint, nice sounding woman. It's not like I ever went to it. Probably because I already had heard ghost stories when I was a little kid, and I was like, oh, there's a spooky ghost across the hall. Oh. But also because, if you need me, just come and get me, bitch. I'm fucking too lazy for that. But I had never imagined something this distinct. In fact, every time I did, it was always a nightmare, and I woke up knowing it was a nightmare. And when it was over, I was like, ooh, thank God that was all a nightmare. And I'm assuming that this wasn't a nightmare, only due to the fact that he actually moved rooms and his mom came and got him afterwards. So, it probably all happened in his head, which is just fucking, that's terrifying. Imagine if adults could have, like, imaginations that overactive and scary. People would be fucking afraid of the dark all the time. Like, you would never ever want to be alone at all. You couldn't be in a room unlit, like, ever. But anyways, that's about all I have to say for this. I just found two stupid-ass stories online, wanted to read them out. Thanks for watching my video, I guess. Bye.